8 minutes that investigators didn't account for. 8 minutes buried deep inside surveillance footage that everyone looked at, but nobody truly saw. 8 minutes that just tore the Nancy Guthrie investigation wide open. And here's what's truly haunting about this. The cameras were there. The footage existed. The timeline had been laid out, reviewed, studied, pored over by some of the best federal investigators in the country. And still, nobody noticed the gap. Not until now. Think about that for a second. An 84-year-old woman snatched from her home in the dark of night. A masked figure caught on her own doorbell camera. Her blood found on her own front steps. A ransom note demanding $6 million in Bitcoin landing in the news. The FBI flooding in. Hundreds of agents searching. Genetic genealogy labs going to work. And yet, through all of that, 8 critical minutes sat quietly in the shadows, unexamined, holding what could be the single most important clue in this entire case. What happened in those 8 minutes? Who was there? And why did someone go through such extraordinary lengths to make sure that window of time stayed invisible? Stay with me, because what investigators just discovered inside that gap is about to change everything you thought you knew about the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Nancy Guthrie is not just a name on a missing persons report. She is an 84-year-old grandmother, a woman who, by all accounts, lived a quiet, full, beautifully ordinary life in the sun-drenched foothills just outside Tucson, Arizona. Her home sat in the Catalina foothills, an affluent, peaceful neighborhood nestled gently against the Sonoran Desert, where the air smells like creosote after rain, and the evenings settle into something close to stillness. The kind of neighborhood where neighbors know each other by name, where people feel genuinely, deeply safe. She is also the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the NBC Today show anchor who millions of Americans wake up with every single morning. That detail matters, not because it makes Nancy more worthy of a search, but because it tells you something real about who she was. She raised a daughter the whole country trusts. She was somebody's North Star. She was family. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy did what she had done countless times before. She went to her daughter Annie's house for family game night. Cards on the table, voices filling the room. The kind of warm, ordinary Saturday that people take for granted until it's suddenly the last image they have left to hold on to. She arrived at approximately 5:32 in the afternoon. She laughed. She played. She was present, warm, and alive in all the ways that matter. Then, at 9:48 that same night, her son dropped her off at home. He watched the garage door go up. He watched her walk in. He drove away. That was the last confirmed moment Nancy Guthrie was seen by someone who loved her. The next morning, she didn't show up to church. That single absence was the crack in the silence, the first sign that something was terribly, desperately wrong. Her family called. No answer. They drove over. And what they found stopped the world. Her home showed signs of a struggle. Blood, her blood, later confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff, was found in small drops on her front steps. She was gone. Within hours, the Pima County Sheriff's Department launched a full investigation. Within days, the FBI was embedded in the case. The story spread from Tucson to every corner of the country. A grandmother abducted in the night. No suspects named. No arrest made. Just a creeping, devastating silence where answers should have been. And in the middle of all that silence, 8 minutes were quietly waiting to speak. Let's go back to the very beginning, because to truly understand what the 8-minute gap means, you first have to understand what investigators were working with the night Nancy disappeared. Her own home surveillance caught something chilling. Doorbell camera footage, the kind typically reserved for delivery drivers and solicitors, captured a figure standing outside her front door, masked, armed, wearing gloves and carrying a backpack. This was not a random passerby. This was someone who came prepared, someone who had thought this through, planned every detail, and chosen Nancy Guthrie specifically. When the FBI released images from that doorbell footage, the nation froze. Here was the face of evil, reduced to a silhouette. A figure dressed in black, methodical and calm, tampering with the very camera that was supposed to catch them. That single detail sent investigators spinning. Why tamper with a camera unless you knew exactly what it would record? Why wear gloves unless you understood precisely what DNA could cost you? This person knew exactly what they were doing. They had studied that house. They knew the layout. They may have even known Nancy's daily routine. And that's where investigators began to ask a question that sounds deceptively simple, but cuts straight to the bone. How long had this person been watching? Because what was becoming unmistakably clear was that this was not random. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was targeted, calculated, personal, in a way that made the search feel even more desperate and urgent than it already was. The Pima County Sheriff's Department worked around the clock to reconstruct the full timeline. Every minute painstakingly accounted for. Every camera in the neighborhood checked, cataloged, reviewed. Neighbors turned over their Ring footage willingly. Law enforcement canvassed miles of road in every direction. And piece by piece, a picture began to form, but it had a hole in it that absolutely nobody could explain. 8 minutes. Right there, in the very middle of the timeline. A black window where the footage simply didn't match up. Here's what made it so deeply significant. Investigators had already established that Nancy's garage door opened at 9:48 p.m. when her son dropped her off. They had footage of activity outside the home earlier in the evening. They had the masked figure captured on camera. But when forensic analysts began stitching the timeline together frame by frame, a gap emerged, an approximately 8-minute stretch where the doorbell footage went dark, or where the recorded sequence of events simply didn't align with the established timeline. To a casual observer, 8 minutes sounds like nothing. A glitch, a technical hiccup, a camera that needed rebooting. But to a forensic analyst, 8 minutes is an eternity. 8 minutes is more than enough time to enter a home, subdue a person, prepare for transportation, and vanish into the Arizona desert without leaving a single identifiable footprint on the established record. 8 minutes, deliberately engineered, is a masterstroke of criminal planning, and it is a devastating blow to any timeline-based prosecution. What made this discovery truly shake the investigation wasn't just the gap itself. It was everything the gap implied. Someone knew that camera was there. Someone understood how it recorded. Someone moved, acted, and operated within that blind spot with a precision that pointed directly to prior surveillance, technical knowledge, and cold-blooded, deliberate patience. And when investigators finally mapped that 8-minute window against the other evidence, the gloves, the backpack, the tampered hardware, a portrait began to emerge that was far more calculated and far more frightening than anyone had ever publicly admitted. Let's talk about the evidence, because there is far more to this case than any single headline can hold. When investigators first processed Nancy Guthrie's home, they found biological evidence scattered across multiple locations on the property. Blood on the front steps, trace material found inside, and then something even more striking, DNA belonging to someone other than Nancy, collected from a glove left near the scene. That glove became one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. Male DNA, unidentified, and critically, it didn't match a single profile in the FBI's national database. Think carefully about what that means. Law enforcement ran that DNA profile against CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, which holds the genetic profiles of millions of convicted offenders, arrested individuals, and open forensic cases. They found nothing. No match, no flag, no prior criminal record to connect to a name. That told investigators two critical things simultaneously. First, whoever left that DNA had either never been convicted of a felony in the United States, or had never had their genetic profile cataloged by federal authorities. Second, this person was either extraordinarily careful about their criminal footprint, or they were operating entirely outside familiar domestic criminal circles. It also meant the traditional path to identification was effectively closed. You can't simply run a profile and get a name. You can't pull up a mugshot and point at a face. You have to do harder work, slower, more painstaking work. And that's exactly where investigators turned next: forensic investigative genetic genealogy. The same breakthrough science that finally cracked the Golden State Killer case. After decades of silence, the same powerful methodology that has unraveled cold cases once thought permanently, hopelessly unsolvable. Forensic investigative genetic genealogy works like this. You take a DNA sample recovered from a crime scene, upload it to public genealogy databases, and begin building family trees backwards from partial genetic matches. It is painstaking, methodical work. It can take months to yield results, but it carries an extraordinary track record, and in the Nancy Guthrie case, it represented one of the most genuinely promising remaining paths to identifying a suspect. But there was a critical complication, one that DNA expert Cease Moore, one of the leading voices in forensic genealogy, publicly and candidly addressed. The DNA evidence recovered from the Guthrie property presented serious mixture issues. When multiple DNA profiles become layered together at a scene, separating them cleanly enough to construct a reliable genealogical profile becomes exponentially more difficult. The science is undeniably powerful, but it requires clean, uncontaminated data to deliver clean, usable answers. And this is precisely where the 8-minute gap loops back in with devastating relevance. Because if the person responsible for Nancy's disappearance was sophisticated enough to engineer a deliberate blind spot in the surveillance timeline, to move, act, and vanish within a purpose-built window, then the question becomes uncomfortably urgent. Were they equally careful about the biological evidence they left behind? Was the glove a genuine mistake, or was it misdirection, planted intentionally, designed to send investigators down a long, winding genetic path that leads toward nothing? That question, sitting like a seed planted deep in the center of this case, is exactly what has kept forensic experts and seasoned investigators losing sleep at night. Because if this crime was planned at the level the 8-minute gap suggests, then every single piece of evidence must be interrogated not just for what it reveals, but for what it may have been deliberately designed to hide. Now let's talk about the ransom note, because this detail shifts the entire emotional gravity of the case. A letter surfaced, obtained by TMZ, that appeared to be a ransom demand directly connected to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. The demand, $6 million in Bitcoin. $6 million. And it arrived carrying the kind of specific, cold, chilling language that separates a genuine criminal threat from a desperate imitation. No proof of life was included in the initial communication, which immediately forced Savannah Guthrie and her entire family to sit with a question. In the most agonizing possible silence, was Nancy still alive? The Guthrie family responded publicly and with remarkable, heartbreaking dignity. They offered a $1 million reward for any information leading to Nancy's safe return. Savannah, who had continued anchoring the Today Show throughout this ordeal, showing a kind of quiet strength that left viewers across the country genuinely breathless, issued a direct, deeply emotional plea to the public. She asked anyone with information to come forward. She spoke about her mother not as a missing person, not as a headline, but as a real human being, a woman who deserved to come home. The Bitcoin demand introduced yet another layer of serious complexity into the investigation. Cryptocurrency is, by design, extraordinarily difficult to trace in real time. It is cross-border by nature. It is pseudonymous, and it has become the preferred currency of sophisticated criminal operations, seeking to move large sums of money without leaving any traceable paper trail. That single detail told investigators clearly that whoever orchestrated this either possessed genuine, working knowledge of high-value financial extortion, or had studied it closely and deliberately enough to replicate it convincingly. The 8-minute gap suddenly looked even more significant in this context. This was not amateur work. Every element of this crime, the precise timing, the camera manipulation, the careful DNA concealment, the cryptocurrency demand, pointed unmistakably toward someone operating with a level of organization that went far beyond what a single person could improvise and execute in a single night. The search that followed was unlike almost anything seen in a missing persons case in recent memory. Hundreds of agents flooded the Catalina foothills and the broader, surrounding Tucson region. The FBI reviewed what investigators themselves described as tons of video evidence, footage pulled from neighbors' cameras, local business cameras, city traffic cameras, and Border Patrol surveillance cameras stationed miles from Nancy's home. Investigators carefully pursued leads suggesting she may have been transported across the international border into Mexico. They found no conclusive evidence to confirm that, but the scope and geographic reach of the search expanded dramatically in response. A Ring camera from a neighbor living to 0.5 miles away captured footage that investigators found significant enough to fold into their active review. Another neighbor's footage showed a car speeding urgently down the road in the minutes immediately following the estimated time of the abduction. Small pieces, fragmented signals, but placed in the hands of federal analysts trained and experienced in connecting dots across vast, overlapping surveillance networks. Each fragment carried real potential. And through all of it, every lead, every frame of video, every canvassed road, the 8-minute gap loomed stubbornly at the center of the timeline, like a black hole, pulling every other piece of evidence toward it, demanding context, demanding explanation. Forensic scientists began publicly calling for a fresh set of eyes on the case. Bring in the best people, one expert told Fox News plainly. Have them look at that house again, with no prior assumptions, because sometimes what finally breaks a case wide open is someone seeing something that everyone else long ago decided wasn't important. That is the terrifying, quiet beauty of an 8-minute gap. It doesn't look important. It looks like a glitch. It looks like nothing, until suddenly, it looks like absolutely everything. 1 month. As of March 2nd, 2026, day 30. Nancy Guthrie had been missing for a full, agonizing month. 30 days of silence, 30 days of unanswered calls, unwalked hallways, and a church pew left heartbreakingly empty by a woman who had sat in it faithfully for years. 30 days of a family quietly holding each other together while the world watched. Investigators searched relentlessly, and the desert held its secrets close and still. And still, no arrest, no named suspect, no confirmed proof of life. But the Pima County Sheriff made one thing absolutely, unequivocally clear. This investigation was not cold. It was not slowing down. Every lead would be pursued until Nancy Guthrie was found, or until every conceivable path had been fully exhausted. That is not a bureaucratic statement. It is a commitment made directly in the shadow of a missing 84-year-old woman, to her family, to the watching public, and to whoever took her. What's critical to understand is what the 1-month mark truly means within the context of a kidnapping investigation. In the first 48 hours, investigative resources burn at a white-hot, unstoppable intensity. By week 2, media attention quietly begins to drift away from other missing persons cases belonging to people who don't have famous daughters, who don't generate national headlines, who disappear into the same darkness and are searched for with a fraction of the resources and attention. Nancy Guthrie's case inadvertently cast a painfully bright spotlight on that disparity, and Savannah Guthrie acknowledged it publicly, expressing not just private anguish for her own mother, but open grief for every family that has ever had to endure this kind of loss, without the world watching alongside them. That moment of grace, offered in the middle of unimaginable personal pain, said something very profound about the woman who raised her. And now, at the 1-month mark, the 8-minute gap has reshuffled the entire deck. New doorbell footage, surfaced through the exhaustive review of thousands of hours of accumulated video, has refocused investigators' attention on that precise critical window, in a way the case hadn't experienced since its very first urgent days. Within that gap, the sequence of events unfolding around Nancy's front door simply doesn't fully align. The timing of the masked intruder's arrival, the moment of the tampered hardware, and the window during which she is believed to have been taken, all of it converges on those 8 unexplained minutes in a way that is fundamentally reshaping how investigators now understand the abduction itself. Was she taken immediately the moment she entered the garage? Was the intruder already waiting inside when the door rolled open? Did something happen within that 8-minute window that actually preceded what investigators had previously believed to be the precise point of abduction? These are the questions now being asked with sharp, urgent, renewed seriousness. And there is one final detail, quiet, almost deceptively easy to overlook, that layers one more chill onto everything else. One of the FBI-released doorbell camera images, investigators later confirmed, was captured on a completely different date than the others. A different date entirely. which means the masked figure may not have appeared at Nancy's home only on the night of January 31st. They may have been there before, watching, waiting, learning the quiet rhythms of an ordinary woman's ordinary life, patiently, deliberately choosing the exact right moment to shatter it.